Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and I'm an attorney that assists dental associates with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. Today I'm going to talk about dental associate compensation review. So when I am reviewing a contract with the dental associate, what are some main kind of red flag areas in compensation, and then how can we avoid those? So there are many different ways for a dental associate to be compensated. Obviously, you could have a straight base salary. You just come in, do your work, you get a set amount of money, and that's it. That's obviously the simplest to review. I'd also say that's probably the least common way to compensate a dentist nowadays. But that is still for some, especially if you're in like a DSO or corporate-owned practice, they still tend to use base salaries and then maybe offer some potential productivity bonuses. Next would just be a daily rate. This is very common for new dentists. You just come in, you get your daily rate, and you're done. Why do practices do this? Well, one, normally if you're on a daily rate, then you wouldn't get any paid time off. Obviously, it's simple if you're just doing, a short-term assignment, or maybe you're only working at a practice for a few days a week. It just makes things, I guess, easier for the practice. But determining what is a fair daily rate, and it obviously depends, and it can change via specialty. If you're focusing on pediatrics, or maybe you're an endo or a prosthodontist or something like that, those rates change. But just discussing what is fair, what's not, is important in the compensation review. Next would be some kind of percentage of collections model. This is probably the most common when it comes to a dental associate. They would have, or at least you would want to make certain that you have some kind of guaranteed amount for the first, I would say, 6 months at a minimum. It simply takes time to build up a practice, and it I don't know, usually 12 to 18 months is kind of good rule of thumb if you're entering into a practice, for your practice to reach maturity, so like a standard level. Now that can change based upon, are you replacing somebody versus there just being a volume need for you to come in? Are you having to compete for patients with other dental associates in the practice? Anytime I have a dental associate come to me and they say, oh, there's 5 other dental associates in the practice and we're all paying on collections, that is like a death match amongst the dental associates. If they're paid purely on collections and they're all fighting for the same patients, it almost never turns out well. So that's one thing to think about. Now, how a collections-based compensation model works. And we're just assuming you're transitioning off of whatever income guarantee you had in the first, let's just say, 6 months. There's normally somewhere between 30 to 35% of your collections would be a normal amount for a dentist to make. And then and that would just be whatever the practice collects based upon your services, you would get 35% of that. Now, many practices will subtract a percentage of lab fees from that total. Now, this is obviously very specialty dependent as well. If you're doing a lot of pediatric work, not a ton of lab fees associated with that, or if you're doing implants and some other cosmetic type stuff, crowns, bridges, yet there are more lab fees associated with that. A normal percentage of lab fees deducted from your collections would be similar to the percentage of whatever your compensation is. So if you have a 32% collection rate as far as your comp goes, most practices will then do a 32% lab fee deduction. For most, and once again, this is a generalization, for most dental associates, lab fees are not prohibitively expensive, and the total of what you're going to make, it may take out 2 to 6%, once again, depending upon what you're doing, of whatever your compensation would be. So just keep that in mind when you're looking into it. And then there could be hybrid models where you get a daily rate in addition to a percentage of collections over a certain amount. Many practices will do, let's just say, a monthly reconciliation. So they will take all of the money that was collected based on what you did for the practice, subtract out the lab fees, compare that to what they paid out via a daily rate. And then if there's any money left over, you would then get a percentage of whatever that money was. And that's normally smaller than what a normal collections percentage would be. So I'd say anywhere from 15 to 25% would be a normal amount. So those are kind of different models. Just understanding what is a fair rate based upon where you are, what you're doing, what your specialty is pretty important when looking at this. I don't think, and this is no shots at the dental industry, but I would say many like smaller, dentist-owned practices sometimes are not that savvy about how they compensate the dental associate. And just one more red flag that just popped to mind. If you are, have a collections-based compensation model, you want to make absolutely certain that there's no language in there that says your compensation ends at the date that your contract is terminated. So think of it this way. Let's say a practice's average accounts receivable cycle for an insurance claim is 30 days. So if you give notice and you're working out, let's say it's a 60-day notice, well, that last month, you're doing all of this work, but then the practice isn't collecting it until after you're gone. So if you have something in your contract that states you get no collections after the contract terminates, you essentially worked for free for the last month. So you always want some kind of window after you leave where you still get a percentage of the collections. I would say a minimum 90 days. Indefinitely, obviously, would be great. So something to keep in mind. If you have any questions about an employment agreement or independent contractor agreement, feel free to contact my law firm at the information listed below in the description. And I appreciate you watching the video. All right, thanks. Take care.